Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to today's presentation, An Ethical Approach to Healthcare Data and Privacy Management. I am Francisco Balestrin, President of the National Association of Private Hospitals in Brazil, and a member of the IHF Governing Council, and in fact also the designated president with Dr. Eric. I am pleased to welcome Dr. Liisa Maria Voipio Pulkki, Director of the Healthcare Group for the Ministry of Social Affairs and Health in Finland. Dr. Voipio has served as the Chief Medical Officer for the Ministry of Social Affairs and Health since 2010. Previously, she served as the Senior Medical Advisor of the Finnish Association of Local and Regional Authorities from 2004 to 2009, and Chief of Emergency and Acute Care for the Helsinki University Hospital District. Dr. Voipio Pulkki is a specialist in internal medicine and cardiology and has published more than 100 original papers on cardiovascular medicine. Dr. Voipio Pulkki earned her medical degree from the University of Helsinki in 1937 and her PhD in 1986. Please join me. Welcome Dr. Liisa Maria Voipio Pulkki. Chair is yours.
Thank you very much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. And thanks for coming. It's the last day of the conference and the morning after a fantastic gala dinner. So thanks for coming. And thanks for the invitation to IHF to share with you some thoughts about how Finland has put into practice, we think, an ethical approach to healthcare data privacy and management. Here is a short bio and the learning objectives of these presentations. I'll come back to these learning objectives during my presentation. And I have no conflicts of interest to declare except for the fact that I work for the government of Finland. So, Finland. We have heard of wonderful institutions, hospitals, and organizations like Kaiser Permanente. But here comes an example of a country, and I'm using Finland as an example. Finland is a geographically fairly big country on the European scale, but population-wise we are small, 5.5 million. There are areas that are densely populated, particularly in the southern and western parts of the country, but the rural northern and eastern parts are getting more and more less densely populated. So there is a huge demographic change ongoing, as in many other countries all over the world. Our social safety net was actually built before this demographic change. The Finnish population has had a great trust in the authorities, at least until now. It has its historical roots, but one of the main reasons to this can be that the social safety net in Finland was actually built in times of austerity in the post-war era. Our benefits system is based on residence, so it's thoroughly different from all the other examples that I think we have been told about. So most of the benefits, be they health or social care associated, are based on residence, and only a small part of the social safety network is based on employment. So this was highlighted very clearly in the Constitution, which was reviewed in 1999. The public authorities shall guarantee for everyone adequate social, health, and medical services and promote the health of the population. It is only recently that we have started to wonder what was meant by the word adequate. This is a very simplified bird's eye picture of our health and social care system. It is deeply divided between two sectors of public power: the government, that is the state, and then the municipalities. Both have the right to levy taxes, and the government subsidizes the municipalities' social and health and other expenses for basic services by roughly 1/3 of the expenses. The role of the government is relatively restricted, though. The tools that we have are legislation, that is the norms, the money that I already briefly described, strategic guidance, whatever that means, and monitoring the processes, and in some cases also the outcomes. But otherwise, the municipalities are quite autonomous in the operations of service delivery. The municipal sector is divided into two parts: the healthcare centers, the primary care centers, and then hospitals, which are owned by municipal coalitions, and the number right now is 20. These two sectors have separate, although they have same owners, they have separate budgets and administrations, and there is a certain firewall between the two. This has been the case until now. It's going to change. Because everybody is interested in money, I'm just showing the basic financial figures, not going through in detail, but just pointing your attention to that the average percentage of OECD health percentage of the gross domestic product, we are very close to that actually for the time being, and the total health expenditure per capita is a little bit over 3,000 euros, and €1, I guess, is $1.1 right now. So what do we get for this relatively decent amount of money? We get some of the world's best health statistics, particularly infant mortality and cancer screening and survival rates. Let me say that these are those services that all population groups attend by almost 100%. But as all other nations, we also have challenges: aging population, but also accumulation of social and health problems, in part due to the demographic change, not entirely though. Very interesting figures have recently been published from the city of Oulu, from northern Finland, and I guess they can be generalized to the whole country. Once again, about 10% of the population spend about 80% of public social and healthcare resources. But what is interesting is that 2/3 of these people are highly dependent on both social and healthcare services. And we also have a phenomenon of increasing socioeconomic and health inequalities, particularly the lowest income quintile of men is not benefiting from the improvement of health status as everybody else in the country is. So the system is being criticized and the system is being somehow challenged thoroughly. And one of our main challenges is how to convince the 90% of the population who actually pay for the system that it's still worthwhile maintaining. Moreover, if we continue the way we do, we will be stealing from the future generations, as the projections show that everything will be critically wrong in 20 years from now. So we have to act now. We have a new government, and the Prime Minister Juha Sipilä's government program announced that there will finally be a social and healthcare reform, so that instead of the 180 independent organizations, we are going to have something between 5 and 19, the political decisions still pending, regional authorities in a few years from now who take care of the whole thing. There will be full integration of primary, secondary and tertiary healthcare, as well as public health services with social services. And here comes the beef. Maximal digitalization of all services. And the decision how this will be done will be made in a couple of months from now. In other words, who's going to be responsible, for example, for the electronic health record system? But this actually didn't come from out of the blue, because the foundations for this being possible were actually laid more than 10 years ago. Many people say that far too many years ago. So from 2002 till 2006, there was a process that actually laid the foundations for a national archive of health information for the country. And it has 3 main pillars: e-prescription, e-archive, e-access, which allows the citizens to view their own prescriptions and electronic records. But notably, this is not a monopoly, not a monolithic system, but the national services are accessed through local systems. Too many local systems, many people think, and I think I'm going a little bit ahead of the affairs, that we will probably have in the next few years 2 local or regional systems in the country that cover most of the population. So this picture shows you the ICT architecture of the Kanta archive right now. The My Kanta pages, that is the e-access, is now among the 10 most popular web pages in Finland. There are many interesting features in this architecture, like patient summary management, consent and will management, citizens, healthcare professionals can access it, and all the public service providers are obliged to use this system. For private institutions, it is in a way voluntary, but most of them have opted to do so. And there are many assisting databases. So let me give you some statistics. More than 4 million persons of the 5.5 now have their medical documents in this Kanta repository. It's actually very good in line with the current EU policy on improving resilience of the EU health systems by the use of e-health and also mobile health in the future. We actually in Finland think that the EU should actually move forward much more rapidly than it actually is right now doing, but member states are different. So there is a need for creating a common legal framework and also a common e-health digital service infrastructure among the EU member states that will allow, for example, e-prescription and patient summary transfers in cross-border care and enable between institutions, the European reference networks to act efficiently. Also, patients have found and adopted the fairly recently opened opportunity to review their own data. So monthly visits are now about 500,000. So that is 10% of the population goes and checks their health data monthly from this Kanta repository. The e-prescription was the first one to be installed, and it is almost completely now in action. Its implementation is nearly 100%, and it will be obligatory with very few exceptions by January the 1st, 2017. And already now, nearly all prescriptions are electronic in Finland. So this is the first test case about privacy management and data security, because it's already there. Prescription data and patient records are, of course, sensitive medical information. And the Kanta services were built on purpose, and it took a long time, so that the services allow the information to be handled confidentially and securely. That means that all communication between healthcare providers, pharmacies, and the electronic archive and the prescription center must be encrypted. And all users must pass an identity check based on a strong authentication scheme. It is a special card with a chip for the professionals, and for the patients there are 3 options. And I guess the most popular right now is the secure code with which you can use your bank accounts. You can use the same one to approach this system. The prescription center is accessible to healthcare professionals only in relation to their professional duties. You just cannot go there and check things for fun. Electronic signatures are in use, and healthcare organizations and pharmacies and Kela, which is the Kanta database manager, our national health insurance institution, regularly monitors the legality of the information processing system. And there is a possibility to do also retrospective checks. But what is most interesting is that patients can check how their personal information is used. This is a crucial feature. So just by logging in, you can monitor which organizations have used your information. And for technical reasons, it is not immediately available, but you can also request the registry authority to detail who has done that. And this has actually been used and has resulted in some reclamations and even, as far as I know, a few lawsuits. So this is unfortunately in Finnish. It shows you the homepage, where the patients can check the log data of their e-prescriptions. The patient part of the Kanta website is available fully in English and also in Swedish, which is our second official language. So far, so good. But everything that glitters is not gold. And the introduction of the electronic health record repository has had no positive but mostly negative publicity. And why was that? If we still remember that Finland is one of the forerunners of the EU countries in e-health, and it is widely used in all segments of the healthcare system. Why was this negative publicity so common? It was the forerunner's dilemma. There was no national plan in the beginning. So we have to cope with old electronic health record systems, old and clumsy, that above all are not user-friendly and have poor interoperability. So the most common opinion of the patients in the beginning on all this was that doctors talk to their computers or iPads, not to me. So this was disruptive. And of course, because for the professional, that means that you have to change your practices. That gave a good reason to be very, very critical. But there has been no public criticism, at least to a significant amount, on the data privacy issue. But we had to act on the ministerial level, and so there was recently a new strategy published that tries to introduce a new business model and take more into account the user's perspective on the new electronic health record programs and apps. And it needs active user involvement in the development and so on. You are very familiar with this. I'm not going to describe in detail this new strategy, e-health and e-social strategy. Somebody said here that culture eats strategy for lunch, and that is true, but this strategy documents give us some guidelines of how to move forward towards the full digitalization of both health and social services. Let's move to the second part of the presentation and learning objectives, how to incorporate new data into clinical databases. And let's begin with electronic health record privacy and consent legislation. Patient records are sensitive personal information which can only be created and handled according to specific legislation, both data protection and patients' rights legislation. Instead of consent per procedure, we use a general consent when the patient approaches healthcare, and then whatever happens thereafter is guided by legislation. So information of data disclosures between the local providers and the hospital districts register, as well as removal of putting the data into the data repository, must be given to the patient upon the first contact, either orally or in writing. And patients must also be informed that they can refuse to have their records passed between registers in whole or partially. And the Kanta patient repository keeps up-to-date information of consent limitations so that if there is such a limitation, no retrieval can be made by another unit. Refusal is, however, rare. Availability of this data to other service providers is generally expected, and it is annoying if it is not. So digital information is generally considered safe, at least until now. Much safer than paper, and let's be honest, so it is. But things move forward, and quite rapidly. So the next step, quite clearly, is that citizens become more and more service users instead of patients. So they want to do things more and more themselves. So among the new strategy, it's very clearly said that by 2020, there must be availability for citizens to use online services and produce data for their own use and for the professionals, to be available through the Kanta repository. And the pressure has been so high that in the new government's program, it is actually said that there has to be a national solution to this instead of many commercial ones. and it has to be materialized within the 4-year time that they will be in power. So here we are, and the work is ongoing. There is no legislation for the time being for such kind of a data repository in Finland. So I turn myself to the EU legal framework applicable to lifestyle and well-being apps. And there is quite a new working document on that. So the EU Data Protection Directive is transposed by national legislation, for example, our electronic health record legislation. And the Commission has paid attention to that some mobile health apps may fall under the definition of medical devices. And for the producers, guidelines to evaluate this have been available since 2012, and they are regularly updated. And in these working papers, I like the way that it's very frankly said that app developers unaware of data protection requirements, and some of the keenest advocates of these apps, may actually create unwanted threats to the privacy and reputation of users of smart devices, so that they don't recognize the risks themselves. But I think that as soon as the national own care or self-care app will be available in the next few years, this discussion on the confidentiality of self-gathered data versus consumer rights is to be expected. And the key question then is actually who owns the data? In our system, as long as it's your data, it's yours. But if you open it up to the healthcare provider and want it to be part of your health records, if I read the present legislation, then you also give the ownership of that data to the healthcare provider and the responsibility for maintaining it. There were some talks yesterday on big data, so I'm not going to touch that deeply, but that's evidently the next step, and I'm referring to the big data that we collect in our everyday lives with the apps. If you open a web page, about 50 signals go somewhere about who you are, how you behave, and what you want. But if somebody is interested in a very good paper on this, I wrote the reference to a recent opinion paper by the European Data Protection Authority. It's from September, and it's very good reading. All of a sudden, everybody else is interested in our data because digital health opens up business opportunities. And now the whole scenario changes. And in the post-Nokia country, we must be interested in every new business opportunity that particularly our digital experts could pursue. They lost their jobs. And this gives rise to knowledge management discussions. Knowledge first, then decisions. So how can we use all the knowledge that is around us and is being collected, regardless of if we want or not, to support well-being and also to help us to reform the services? So there is urgent need for real-time data and information systems supporting healthcare, real-time, to help policy making and managing to be more effective, cost-effective, high quality. You know this business. But also to help research, development, and innovation to restart the growth engine. So this opens up the question of the secondary use of personal data, apart from what has been possible until now, of course, official statistics collected from also from health records by authorized organizations. So our ministry actually joined two other ministries, the Ministry of Employment and Economy and the Ministry of Education and Culture, to write the National Health Sector Growth Strategy for Research and Innovation Activities. And for the first time, this strategy examines the health sector, including health data, from the perspective of innovation and business growth. And I can say that this was facilitated very much by the recent discussions about the use of genomic information. The background to this was that we had a very modern biobank law written in the beginning of the 2010s. And on top of the national healthcare registers and large clinical population sample collections, the biobank activities provide invaluable information for medical research and innovation. Biobanks are separate from traditional sample collections by being established for collecting data and for multiple future research studies based on the so-called wide consent. Explicit consent from sample donors for every study is not feasible. So we need to have other safeguarding methods, and our biobank law very strictly regulates the activities of the national biobanks. But this is a tough issue, a sore point on the European scale. And so when the European Union is now reviewing its data privacy protection legislation, we and many other countries want to emphasize that biobanking and the secondary use of personal data, such as register-based research, should be secured with sufficiently flexible regulation in the EU. This is an ethical issue. If we make research and generation of new information for the help of the patients too difficult, because we fear that in some rare cases the information could be abused, that is an ethical issue. A very difficult ethical issue is consent withdrawal, because that opens up the question about what is science and what is research and development, innovation. But I'm not going to touch that in detail, but that question deeply divides our scientific communities for the time being. So we are approaching the era of personalized medicine, and Finland, as many other countries, would like to be in the forefront of that. And we have a justification for that because we have reliable and comprehensive registries and population databases for a long time, and now that we have this new biobank law and the electronic nationwide patient data repository, that combination is really valuable. And some of the big companies have already noticed that. So there is now a new interest in nationwide research collaboration and the secondary use of all this data through biobanks, particularly in oncology and neuroscience. And the population still maintains a very positive attitude towards this kind of research. The key is to improve the operating environment of the whole ecosystem, as you very well know. But not all parties in this game understand really thoroughly the nature of the data that we, as responsible healthcare providers, have to give them, and how that can be done in an ethical way, maintaining trust. There are other challenges too. The biobanks, like the electronic health records, were founded one by one, and they have different data infrastructures, and now there is a national and actually a European attempt ongoing to harmonize their ICT infrastructure. And people are hungry for results, and they dream big, And this, I think, is the scenario where we are going. All possible kinds and qualities of information will be combined at some point to create new knowledge, new treatments, better health. But there's a long way to go, and it has to begin with data harmonization. And right now, our biobanks are really, really eager to go forward with data harmonization so that the Kanta repository, it is not enough. It is fairly structured, but it's not enough for the purpose of research, rapid finding of a certain subgroup of patients that would either be needed for research or benefit from something new that has been recently discovered. And this, I think, is for the time being the most stressful discussion on the data privacy issue, at least in Finland, how to handle all this data in biobank-based research. And the biobanks themselves are doing their best. Don't ask me about the details, it goes beyond my expertise. But we have recognized that it's not an issue for the biobanks only, but it's an issue for the whole ecosystem. This is a busy slide, but this is so new that I couldn't get a more clearly or artistically written one. There are two processes ongoing in Finland that try to solve this problem. First, there is a new legislation on the way on the secondary use of sensitive health data and other sensitive personal information. There is a working group working on that, and the deadline is halfway next year. They don't have too many months' time to contemplate on this. For right now, the data that has been deposited in Kanta archive is not available. It's legally prohibited to use it for secondary purposes because there were some suspicions in the beginning of that system. But now it needs to be lifted. And there has to be rules and codes of conduct for that. Second, there is now a project funded by Sitra, a development fund that reports to the Parliament, how we should actually aim at a national operator for health and well-being information to be used in combination with the new legislation, so that not every single university hospital, every single biobank would build their own and waste resources. And there is a thought behind this also to sort of create national cooperation instead of fierce competition. The role of the national operator, the project has just started, and it is being pursued in close collaboration with the ministries. And it aims at a model that probably has some of the roles of authorities and some of the roles of a commercial operator. But we will see. The driving force behind all this, I'm repeating what I already said briefly, was that there was a working group on national genome strategy recently, which I had the honor to chair. And we are right now talking to ministers about how to put this into action. And there are two key features that are relevant to this morning's topics: ethical principles and legal framework. They must be available for the application of genomics so that this new, wonderful type of information would be available to all in the country, and not just for those who have the money and knowledge to make use of it. And second, we wouldn't be doing the same mistakes that we did or made with the first biobanks. So there should be a common informatics infrastructure in place for the effective application of genomics among different institutions, be they clinical research or other institutions. I know that this is a very burning issue in all countries, particularly when it comes to drug development, biological drugs, cancer drugs, tailored drugs, personalized medicine, however you want to call it. There is a constant need for discussion between us, authorities, the regulators, and the companies about the new rules of the game. And we don't always understand each other. The European Medicines Agency is doing a great job in looking for new ways to decision-making of innovative medicines. But while I'm here, there was actually a roundtable discussion in Finland in the ministry about if all this regulation is too much for the industry, when we tend to think that is actually the question. It's about protection of patient privacy and safety. But we have to find a way out. And ladies and gentlemen, finally, the third topic, how to include patients, physicians, and other healthcare professionals in the development and use of e-health and m-health. How to make all this happen in real life. We have spent a few minutes on research and high science, but let's go back to basics. How to make all this happen in real life? Well, if it happened in life and other industries, why should it not happen in health and social care? And let's remember that information and digitalization is not the main thing, but it serves the main purpose, which is to have a good health system for all countries, all nations, all people. And this is the famous WHO building blocks of a health system. I showed you in the beginning a map of Finland, and this is the predicted population change till 2030. How do we maintain equity and adequate services to everybody, protected by the Constitution, when the country will look like this? And money, prosperity, industry, it moves and people move to places where they have opportunities to live. So I think we have to take two things seriously. The first thing is to put services on wheels. And this is a real process already. This is no imagination. This is how things are being taken care of in many, many municipalities in Finland right now. But even more marked is the situation in the northern part of the country, Lapland. We don't have the Norwegian mountains, but we do have big skiing resorts there, intensive airline traffic for Christmas to see Father Christmas, and relatively few service sites, primary healthcare centers. There are a couple of really good hospitals, 2 or 3 really good hospitals, but they are far away. And it came to my mind to show you one of the latest developments in e-health and digitalization, which is the enterprise which we share with the between the emergency care, out-of-hospital emergency care, and the police, fire and rescue brigades, social services, and some other, including the military in certain cases. This is a serious attempt to create digital cooperation beyond healthcare, also in the urban areas, but particularly in the rural areas, for the emergency field operations system. It is an ICT system that aims at common actions and share of information when many different authorities are needed at the same time. This is supposed to be operational in, if I'm a little bit conservative, 3 to 4 years from now. The basics are already there. And this actually will give us the first uniform national patient health record for out-of-hospital care. The same record for everybody. Ladies and gentlemen, we believe that in times of rapid demographic change and austerity, to be honest, uniform social and health services, at least in the case of Finland, can still improve population health, promote social inclusion, and prevent marginalization. A well-designed health system can and it must provide both adequate benefits and be financially sustainable. Digitalization is not a goal in itself, but it is a key to success in this remodeling of the health systems. But digital health needs good governance. We have learned it from our experience. And its components should not be adopted randomly. In particular, when citizen involvement and empowerment is here, and mHealth is really the tool for that. People need guidance for data protection and behavior because of the sensitive nature of the personal data. And I think that we haven't been able to mediate this message efficiently. We don't follow that ourselves in our lives. When I asked my colleagues what would be the take-home message for this talk, they mentioned one word, and it was trust. There are questions that we must be able to answer to maintain people's trust in digital health. Data and consent management. Who can see and who has used my data? My caregivers for a good reason. My service providers maybe for a good reason. Biobanks for what? Even if I gave a consent. What about commercial companies? There have been studies in Finland that showed that as long as the commercial companies are domestic, no problem. But if the data goes someplace else, people have questions. Self-care and self-analysis services, they are so strongly advocated these days, mainly by healthy people. Who will then evaluate and make use of my data? And we need to collect evidence for better care experience and impact on outcome, and not just nice to know type of experiences. And I think that at the end of the day, these tools will allow much more personalized service modeling and communication with patients than we as professionals educated in the 60s, 70s, and 80s were taught to pursue. So we have to learn to respect patients' interest, patient satisfaction, and maintain the human touch when needed. And I would like to show my couple of last two slides. The first shows that even if the population grows older, the most remarkable phenomenon is that the elderly among the old increase rapidly. I'm going to be 85 in 2030, I think. So it's a question about me. And I hope that there will be hands around to help me if I need those hands in 2030. So let's not forget the human touch. And this is my last slide. Health is global. Whatever we learned, whatever we have, we better share with the others. Thank you so much. And there are a few minutes left, so I'm glad to entertain questions if you have any, or comments. If we all need coffee. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Liisa. Thank you for your complete presentation about the future. And, well, I'm a little jealous because I'm from a country called Brazil that we are facing with so many problems and challenges. And I would like to make a question for you, using my position here. How could you think that we in undeveloped countries, could you think your experience in the future to get more a comprehensive observation of our system and get those in our countries?
Well, I'm nobody to give you advice, but I think that the less developed countries, I'm not sure if Brazil counts as one of those, but I'm talking even about the African countries, is to go directly to mobile applications. That is the answer, the one answer, because mobile phones are now in everybody's hands, and mobile applications give access to e-health to everybody.
Thank you. Breakthrough presentation. Please, again, I would like to make a warm. Thank you very much. Well, I have some administration information for you. The coffee break, as you know, we will now hold at the Columbus Ballroom Foyer, located outside the rear doors until 10:30, followed by the concurrent sessions. More information is located in the conference program. Have a nice day.